I became the daughter-in-law of the richest man. The richest man took a liking to me and asked me to marry his son. He wanted me to properly discipline his son, who was known for squandering his family's wealth and chasing after women. He asked if I could take on such a responsibility. I laughed out loud. From today onwards, if that wastrel dares to flirt with any woman, I'll break his legs. 1. I was having barbecue skewers with my best friend. She was scrolling through her phone, making clicking noises and showing me the screen. Look at this. Look, the nation's young master has changed girlfriends again. I glanced at the screen. It was a news article about the son of the richest man, James Carter. The article included photos of him. He was more handsome than any movie star, with an air of superiority. Anyone who saw him would naturally address him as young master. The problem was that this young master was a notorious wastrel. He swapped out more than a dozen girlfriends a month. Rich and good-looking, he accepted all comers and gave generous breakup fees when the relationships ended. So what if he changes girlfriends? I dismissed it casually and downed another drink. I was starting to feel a bit dizzy. My best friend nudged me, raising her brows. What would you do if he were your husband? Husband? At that, I perked up. If I were the wife of that idiot wastrel James Carter, and he dared to go out and find a girlfriend, I'd break his legs. Playing the stock market? Losing money on every deal? If he were my husband, I'd keep a close eye on him. Dare to bring shame on me by squandering more money? I'd make him regret it. Look at those dark circles under his eyes. No way his kidneys can keep up with that kind of lifestyle. Mid-sentence, my friend suddenly widened her eyes in shock, staring at me in horror. She started blinking rapidly. I burped. What's wrong with your eyes? Cramping? And also, his father is an idiot too. Doesn't even bother to discipline his only son. What a mess! If I were his mother, I'd smack him across the head and immediately get started on training another one. I was getting more and more excited, and it was getting harder to control myself. Suddenly, someone tapped me on the shoulder from behind. I think you're making some good points. Would you be willing to help me discipline him? Who was that? I squinted and turned around. Smash! The bottle of beer I was holding fell to the floor. Standing behind me was a middle-aged man in a white shirt, with a piercing gaze and a straight posture, looking eerily familiar. It was James Carter's father, Oliver Carter, the richest man in the UK? Someone tell me, why is the richest man in the country eating barbecue at this humble roadside joint? My best friend quickly covered her face and made her exit. No need to be afraid, said Oliver Carter, his face serious. I think you're right. So, what do you think? Would you be willing to be? My eyes brightened. His mother? Oliver Carter's face darkened. His wife? Too. Oliver Carter took me to the legendary estate known as Admiral's Peak. I had never seen such a massive villa in my life. The floor alone cost over £30,000 per square meter. I sat on the sofa, and Oliver Carter sat across from me. A while later, the villa door opened. In walked a man wearing a black Gucci t-shirt, holding a chain in his hand. It was Oliver Carter's son, James Carter. He froze when he saw us. Dad, why are you here? What's this? Oliver pointed at the chain, his face dark. My dog. You've seen it before. Wait, where's my dog? James panicked, turning around to look for it. I was speechless. 2 minutes later, a husky sauntered in, dragging the chain behind it. James, now scowling, pointed at me and looked toward his father. You really brought her here? Oliver's face grew even darker. My wife is still alive. Ahem. I cleared my throat, feeling like it was my turn to speak. I carefully chose my words. You're James, right? Come here, kneel down. Your mother has something to say to you. James's eyes nearly popped out of his head. What is this? James ground his teeth, looking at Oliver. Calmly, Oliver said, Introduce yourself. This is the wife I've arranged for you. From now on you will listen to her. James was completely stunned. Her? He sized me up. from head to toe, with a disdainful look. She looks so plain. And you expect me to listen to her? Dream on. Oliver ignored him and handed me a bank card. This is for you. From now on, all his money will be deposited into your account. What? James was baffled. Oliver, still calm, narrowed his eyes at his son. From now on, all your money will go to your wife. That includes your cars, houses, everything under your name has already been transferred to her. Understood? James was furious. Why should I? Even my money is in your mother's hands. What do you think? Oliver snapped. Stop talking nonsense or I'll slap you. I smiled, holding the heavy gold card in my hand. So this is what wealth feels like? From now on, he's your responsibility. Discipline him well, and the money is yours to spend as you please. After saying this, Oliver ignored James's furious protests and turned to leave. Before he walked out, he gave me a signal. Don't hold back. Feel free to hit him if needed. You're right about everything. And if you accidentally kill him, I'll just start again with a new son. There's still time. Boom. The door closed behind him. I was speechless. James was speechless. There was a bit of family affection, but not much. 3. What does it feel like to become wealthy overnight? Clutching the gold card in my hands, I was so excited I sent a message to my best friend. Me, I'm rich now. Her, if you've been kidnapped, blink twice. Me, even if I were kidnapped, how would blinking help? I texted her the whole story, every word. After reading it, she simply replied with 6, internet slang for amazing. Her, I'm starting to feel sorry for James Carter. With you to discipline him, all the childhood lessons he missed out on will be made up. I didn't think much of it. I'm a very gentle person. Hey you! An annoyed voice called from behind me. I turned around and holy crap! James Carter stood there, wrapped in nothing but a bath towel, his 8-pack abs on full display. He smiled at me. Well, sister, what do you think? Like what you see? Yeah. I answered honestly and added, by the way, my name is Hannah Mills. He really was good looking. Hannah Mills, huh? James came closer, smelling like orange-scented body wash, as he leaned in towards me. Oh no. I was going to have a nosebleed. Could you give me back the money? He asked softly. Hearing that, I sobered up immediately, clutching the gold card tightly. I spat out one word. No. Sure, he was handsome, but not as attractive as cold hard cash. Trying to seduce me? Wrong move, buddy. I'd spent 10 years gutting fish at Tesco. My heart was colder than the Arctic winds. Unless, of course, there's money involved. James's face turned dark. Are you kidding me? That's my money. Get lost. I repeated. Damn it. James cursed, his face reddening in anger. If you were a man, I'd have punched you by now. I proudly raised my chin. If I were a man, I wouldn't be your wife, would I? Leave. Now it was his turn to say it. 4. The next morning, I woke up with huge dark circles under my eyes. I was too excited yesterday and didn't sleep well. Someone knocked on the villa door, and I yawned as I went to open it. There stood a man in a black suit. Miss Mills, I'm Mr. Carter's assistant, Tim. These are the keys to young Master James's car and the villa. Mr. Carter asked me to deliver them to you. Before I could process it, Tim handed me a tote bag labeled, Congratulations on your $1 billion deposit, which was stuffed full of keys. I almost dropped it. With the task done, Tim walked away without a second thought, leaving me with the heavy bag. I headed down to the underground garage. Pressing a button, the lights flickered on one by one. The sight in front of me made me drop the bag. The parking garage was massive, as big as an amusement park. And it was filled, wall to wall, with luxury cars. No Mercedes or BMWs in sight. The lowest tier was a Porsche 911, while Ferraris, Rolls-Royces, McLarens and Maseratis dominated the space. I dropped to my knees. This was the wealth of the richest man's son. Yesterday I was too presumptuous. Clutching the weighty bag of keys, I headed back upstairs and locked them safely in my room. Then I made myself a quick breakfast. Not long after, James Carter, rubbing his eyes, came downstairs. The moment he saw me, his face darkened. "Why are you still here?" I smiled sweetly and waved the keys to Admiral's Peak. "Sorry, but this is my home now." "Damn it!" James cursed again, grabbing his jacket off the sofa. "If you're here, then I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" I stopped him. "I'm your wife now. You need to tell me where you're headed." "I'm going to the Royal Lounge. Don't follow me." He snapped and stormed off. The moment he left, he patted his pockets, then shouted in frustration, "Where the hell are my keys?" "They were with me." I snickered to myself as James shot me a furious glare before storming out. After a while, I grabbed one of the many car keys from the bag, selected a McLaren from the underground garage, and headed straight to the Royal Lounge. "Little brat, today I'm setting you straight." 5. Before heading to the Royal Lounge, I made a quick detour to the largest shopping mall in the south. I treated myself to some new gear. Looking in the mirror, I had to admit, I looked pretty good. This new outfit gave me a proper upper-class lady vibe. Well, I guess that's what happens when you have control over all of James's assets. By the time I reached the Royal Lounge, over an hour had passed. I figured James was probably already having fun. It was time for me to make my grand entrance. "Good afternoon. Who are you here to see?" A server greeted me warmly. I smiled softly. "I'm here to see James Carter. Could you take me to him?" "Of course, this way, please." The server led me to the top floor, where James was in private suite 1603. As we approached, I heard James's voice from inside. "Bloody hell, I don't know what's wrong with my dad. He insisted on getting me married to some country bumpkin. I'm furious. He even gave her all my money. He's lost his mind, hasn't even met her more than a few times." There was a bit of filial piety, but not much. A woman's voice chimed in, sweet and delicate. "James, don't be angry. I'm sure your father has been deceived by that woman, but don't worry, we're all on your side." James replied, "You're the best, my sweet Lily." Good Lord, I'd heard enough. I kicked open the door, storming inside. The room went silent. James sat on the sofa, with a delicate-looking girl practically draped over him. Around them were 4 or 5 other men, probably his usual gang of friends. "What the hell are you doing here?" James asked, his surprise quickly turning to disdain. "Who is this?" The girl, Lily, looked at me, wrapping her arm around James's. "She seems so scary." I laughed. Goodness, the sweet fragrance of a manipulative woman. I said, "I'm his mother." Before anyone could react, I grabbed the fruit platter from the table and smashed it into James's face. James was stunned, his eyes blazing with anger as he wiped the fruit off his face. "What the hell?" Before he could finish, I stepped on the table, grabbed him by the shirt, and yanked him up, executing a perfect over-the-shoulder throw. Boom! James hit the ground hard. Since I was 10 years old, I've been trained in Taekwondo, boxing and Muay Thai. I've been a national champion for 14 years. Taking care of this playboy was a piece of cake. Everyone in the room was dumbstruck. 6, especially the girl, Lily, who was clinging to James. She swallowed nervously, trembling. "Ow, damn it," James groaned, trying to pick himself up. I calmly walked over and sat on his back. With his elbows on the floor, he struggled to push himself up, but couldn't. I lit a cigarette, smiling sweetly. "Hello everyone, I'm James's wife Hannah Mills. Apologies for the scene today, but I had to teach him a lesson." The men in the room stammered their responses, their earlier cocky attitude completely gone. Nice to meet you, sister-in-law." "Yes, sister-in-law, very impressive." I nodded in acknowledgement, taking a deep drag of my cigarette. My gaze turned to Lily, who was still trembling in fear. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you do know I'm his wife, right?" Yes, I know," Lily stammered, inching backward. "Then why are you getting so close to him? Do you think I'm just going to sit back and watch?" Lily burst into tears, terrified. I shook my head in disappointment. Today's gold diggers are too weak, too fragile. I'll let you off this time. I put out my cigarette and stood up. James flopped back onto the floor with a thud. But if I catch you again, I'll break your legs. Lily nodded furiously, still crying. Get up, we're leaving. I grabbed James by the collar and pulled him to his feet. I smiled at the others in the room apologetically. Sorry to cut the fun short today. We'll have to hang out again some other time. James, still disoriented, muttered, Someone help me. The others stood up straight, their faces serious. Goodbye, sister-in-law. See you next time, sister-in-law. No one dared to come forward. Whoever tried, I'd beat them just like James. Useless bastards, James shouted angrily. I gave him a quick slap upside the head. Shut up. 7. Once we were in the car, I drove James back to the villa. In the living room, I lounged on the sofa, while James crouched miserably in the corner. So, did you have fun today? I asked with a grin. No, I didn't have fun. James forced a grin through clenched teeth. I sighed and patted him on the shoulder, which made him flinch. James, we're basically a couple now, or at least in a relationship, right? There are certain things I really don't want to DDO. You've probably noticed by now, I'm a very gentle person. I only hit when I'm pushed too far. Isn't that right? James, his face full of silent grievance, nodded. I smiled with satisfaction. See, you've got me, yet you still go out and chase after other women. Don't you think you deserve to be hit? Even though James and I were in a sort of transactional relationship, I also had the task of reforming him. And I can't tolerate any nonsense. As long as we're together, if he ever dares to find another woman, I'll break his legs. Men need discipline, or they won't listen. James was about to say something, but when I narrowed my eyes, he quickly nodded again. Good. You think you deserve it too. Now, what if you go looking for another woman next time? I was training him slowly. James blinked, confused for a moment, then said, Will you hit me again? Exactly. I gently patted his head, and I had to admit, he had really nice hair. It was like petting a dog. Next time, remember to think twice. Don't do this again. Whenever you spend time with other women, it hurts me, okay? James nodded. I smiled. This wastrel, he may lack physical stamina, but his intelligence is even worse. No wonder he loses money on every business deal. Very good. Now, sign this agreement. I pulled a contract out of my bag. James took one look and was dumbfounded. What's this? It's a 3-strike rule, I said, crossing my legs. From now on, if you break any of the rules listed here, you'll lose all your spending money, and you'll get a beating on top of it. James stood up suddenly, his demeanor changing as he glared at me, with fiery defiance. Hannah Mills! This is exploitation. You're nothing short of a tyrant. I'm gonna break my rule about not hitting women today. You'll see what domestic violence really looks like. I smirked. Oh, really? You think you've got what it takes, little boy? Damn it! James clenched his fists and rolled up his sleeves, charging at me with all his might. 8. I kicked him away with one swift motion, sending him flying. He landed a good 4 or 5 meters away, clutching his stomach. You actually hit me! He groaned, struggling to catch his breath. You really hit me? What else did you expect? I responded, unbothered. You charged at me first. I'm delicate, you know. I get scared easily. Don't try to intimidate me. You call this delicate? James struggled to his feet, lifting his shirt to reveal his abs, now bruised and swollen from my kick. All right, I admit, maybe I hit a bit hard, but technically it was self-defense. Ahem, I cleared my throat. Well, you wanted to test me. I just defended myself. James, still wincing in pain, bit his lip. What do you even do for a living? You can't tell? I'm your wife. I might become a full-time housewife after we get married. James glared at me, clearly still upset. I waved my hand, trying to placate him. Fine. I'm a combat instructor. I'm also on the national team for martial arts. Impressive. James shook his head in disbelief, muttering under his breath, My dad must be a genius for finding you to straighten me out. I smiled, feeling a little pride in my abilities. Modesty is key, I said with a wink. Later that night, after James had taken a long hot shower, he lay on the bed, waiting for me to tend to his bruises. I massaged his abs with a bottle of herbal oil, and each time I pressed, he winced and groaned. Could you stop whining? I asked, a little annoyed. I've been hit by you twice already today. Can't I at least groan in pain? Fine. I rolled my eyes, but as I applied the oil, I couldn't help but notice something. For all his flaws, James did have a great body. He was well built, with perfectly toned muscles, and a face that could easily get him out of trouble. He had everything, except maybe intelligence. "Hey, with that temper of yours, how are you ever going to get married?" James muttered as I finished. I raised an eyebrow and shot back, "Don't worry, I'll make sure to marry you." "Get lost." James looked genuinely horrified. 9. Over the next couple of days, James seemed to have calmed down. He didn't go out as much, except for throwing me the occasional dirty look. At least he wasn't getting into any trouble, which meant I didn't need to discipline him. But his good behavior made me restless. I hadn't fought anyone for a while, and I needed an outlet. So, I dragged James out for a shopping spree. I'm not going, James protested, clinging to the bed for dear life. I shot him a glare. "You're going. If you don't, I'll give you a good thrashing." "What for?" "I haven't done anything wrong," James argued. Oh, this cheeky little brat. I whipped out the contract, scribbling furiously as I added a new clause. If Hannah Mills makes a request, James Carter must accompany her, or else he will be punished. James read it over, looking scandalized. "You can't just add random clauses. This is a dictatorship. Have you no shame?" "I'm warning you, Hannah. I have principles and I won't let you walk all over me," James declared, trying to stand his ground. I narrowed my eyes and raised my arm threateningly. In a split second, James jumped out of bed, fully dressed. "Hurry up, we're going shopping, aren't we?" I couldn't help but smile. He had a bit of pride, but not much. We parked in the underground garage of the shopping mall. After walking for only a few minutes, a van screeched to a halt behind us. It nearly hit me. James immediately cursed, "You bloody idiot. Watch where you're going." The van screeched to a halt. Out came 7 or 8 big men, all crammed inside like sardines. "What the hell? How did they all fit in there?" James muttered, wide-eyed. He suddenly grabbed my arm, whispering, "We're in trouble, let's run." I didn't run, and neither did James. I wasn't running because I wasn't scared, and James wasn't running. Because, well, he couldn't. Before I knew it, one of the big men grabbed James by the arm and tossed him into the van. "Help me!" James shouted as the van sped away. They didn't even bother with me. The van disappeared from sight, leaving me standing there alone. I stood there deep in thought. Was this a kidnapping? Why did I feel a strange mix of excitement and thrill? Wait a minute. I snapped out of it and bolted after the van. "You idiots. How did you miss me? I'm right here. Come back, kidnap me too," I shouted. 10. Somehow, I ended up in the van with James. Let me tell you, despite the small size of the van, it was packed. With us included, there were enough people to play 2 rounds of werewolf. Advanced version at that. James sat next to me, fuming but also a little touched. "Are you an idiot? Why didn't you just call the police? Why did you get in the van?" "You don't understand anything, you skinny dog," I said, glaring at him. One of the kidnappers sitting next to me chuckled. "This is a first. We've never had someone actually volunteer to be kidnapped. What mental hospital did you escape from?" Before I could respond, the ringleader smacked him on the head. "Quit laughing. Kidnapping is serious business. Get your act together." Right." The kidnapper, now nursing a bump on his head, went silent. I grinned to myself. But one of the kidnappers spotted me smiling and kicked me. "What are you smiling at, huh?" I swallowed my irritation. "Fine, you wait. Once I figure out who's behind this, I'm going to break your legs." The van's windows were blacked out, so I couldn't tell where we were going. After several twists and turns, we finally came to a stop. "Out of the van!" One of the kidnappers barked, yanking me hard enough to nearly send me headfirst into the ground. That was the second time they'd manhandled me. They led us into what appeared to be an abandoned factory. They took our phones and shoved James down next to me. Before I had a chance to speak, one of them kicked me square in the backside. Bloody hell. I crashed straight into James, who let out a strangled scream. That's the 3rd time. I gritted my teeth and turned to face the brute who had kicked me. "Tell me who you are." The kidnapper sneered at me. "The name's Billy 5. Got a problem?" I narrowed my eyes. "Billy 5, huh? Got it." The ringleader of the group smacked Billy on the head again. "You moron, you're a kidnapper. Why the hell are you telling her your name?" "Oh, right." Billy scratched his head, looking confused. "Now, stay quiet, or you'll regret it," the ringleader growled, glaring at us. Or maybe we'll test how tough you are. Red in, white out, got it. I cleared my throat and, sitting calmly on the ground, said, "Do you lot even know who this is? He's James Carter, the son of Alexander Carter, the richest man in the country. You think you can just kidnap him and get away with it?" At this, James nodded vigorously. The ringleader turned toward James, amused. "So, you're the rich boy, huh?" "Of course." James puffed out his chest, trying to look important. The ringleader smirked and, without warning, slapped James across the face. 11. James was stunned, his face filled with shock. You hit me?" James sputtered, still in shock. His voice trembled with disbelief, and a red handprint blossomed across his cheek. I was instantly furious. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You dare to hit the son of the richest man in the country? You're asking for trouble." The ringleader laughed, leaning in closer to me, his eyes dark and menacing. "You think I'm scared? I've already kidnapped him. What's one more slap?" With that, he slapped James again, even harder. "Say something again, and I'll hit him until he forgets his own name," the ringleader threatened, his tone dangerous. I saw red. "You really think you can get away with this? Yeah?" The ringleader sneered. "I've already gone this far. What's stopping me now?" "Try hitting him one more time," I challenged, my voice dangerously low. Smack! Another slap echoed in the room, this time harder than the last. James's face was flushed red, a look of complete confusion and disbelief on his face. "All right, you've asked for it." I stood up, calmly and deliberately facing the ringleader. "I'm going to make sure you regret this." The ringleader rolled his eyes. "Oh yeah? What are you going to do about it, little girl?" I didn't give him time to react. In one swift motion, I grabbed the nearest chair, swung it in a full arc, and smashed it right over his head. The sound of splintering wood echoed in the room as the ringleader collapsed, completely knocked out. The rest of the kidnappers froze, staring in disbelief. I looked around at the stunned group. "All right," I said, cracking my knuckles. "Who's next?" The remaining kidnappers immediately scattered, too stunned to respond properly. Billy 5, the guy who had told me his name earlier, was next. He tried to back away, but I was too fast. I grabbed him by the collar and threw him to the ground with a powerful judo throw, knocking the wind out of him. "Billy, right? Don't worry, I won't forget your name." The other kidnappers, now completely terrified, ran for the door. But they didn't get far before I caught them, one by one. Within a few minutes, the entire group was on the ground, groaning in pain, while I stood in the middle of the chaos, dusting off my hands. James, who had been watching the entire scene with wide eyes, finally managed to speak. "Hannah, you're amazing." I rolled my eyes. "You could have handled this too if you weren't so soft." James rubbed his sore cheek, wincing. "I don't think I could have. But still, you didn't have to save me like that." I shot him a look. "Of course I did. You're my fiancé. What kind of fiancé would I be if I let these idiots rough you up?" James blushed, a bit of his usual bravado gone. "Well, thanks, I guess." "D'you guess?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're welcome, James. You can thank me later." As I was about to call the police, I noticed one of the kidnappers trying to crawl away. I kicked him in the leg and he froze, whimpering. "Oh no, you're not going anywhere," I said, grabbing my phone and dialing 999. A short while later, the police arrived, looking bewildered by the scene. James and I gave our statements while the kidnappers were carted off, handcuffed and subdued. One of the officers who arrived on the scene seemed to recognize me. His eyes widened and he removed his helmet, revealing a familiar face. "Hannah?" It was Nick, one of my former students from when I worked as a self-defense instructor. He was one of the better students in the police academy who had admired my no-nonsense teaching style. "Nick?" I blinked in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Nick looked between me and the incapacitated kidnappers, his expression a mixture of awe and amusement. I should have known. I heard there was trouble and thought, only Hannah Mills could take down a whole gang of kidnappers on her own. "You've still got it." James, standing next to me, crossed his arms and muttered, "She's a real hero." I smirked. "I do what I can." After a bit more questioning, the police cleared us to leave. As we were walking back to the car, James kept glancing at me, something on his mind. Finally, he blurted out, "You really didn't have to come after me like that, you know?" I stopped walking and looked at him. "James, we're in this together now. You might be a spoiled brat sometimes, but I'm not about to let anyone mess with you." He flushed slightly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, thanks for that. I owe you one," I chuckled. "Just don't get yourself into any more trouble, all right? Next time, I might not be around to save you." James grinned, his confidence returning. "Don't worry, I've learned my lesson. From now on, I'll be careful." Good, I said, smirking, because next time I'm charging you for my services. James groaned. You really are merciless, Hannah, I grinned. You wouldn't have it any other way. Later that evening, after the chaotic day, we returned to the mansion, both of us still a bit shaken but trying to settle back into our bizarre new reality. James was quieter than usual, which was a rare sight. Normally he'd be either complaining or making sarcastic remarks, but today he was just thoughtful. I plopped down on the plush leather couch in the vast living room, tossing my jacket onto the armrest. James hovered awkwardly nearby, glancing at me every few seconds. What's wrong with you? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He blinked, then shook his head. Nothing, just thinking. I rolled my eyes. You? Thinking? That's a first. He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. Yeah, laugh it up. But seriously, today made me realize some things. I could tell he wasn't joking this time. There was something different in his tone, like the usual cockiness had given way to a rare moment of vulnerability. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Oh? Do tell. James paced around for a moment, then sighed. I've been a complete idiot, haven't I? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I just gave him a look that clearly said, You're only just realizing this now? He groaned, sitting down heavily beside me. I mean, seriously, here I am messing around, acting like some playboy with no responsibilities, while you're out there saving me from actual kidnappers. I don't know. I've never really had to do anything for myself. My dad's always bailed me out. But today, you didn't have to come for me. You could have just left me there, but you didn't. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. James, look, you're not a bad person, you just don't know how to be a good one yet. He scoffed. That's a nice way of saying I'm useless. No, I said firmly, you're not useless, you underdeveloped. He stared at me like I had just sprouted another head. Underdeveloped? What am I, a character in a video game? I smirked. Something like that. You've got potential, James. You just need to figure out what to do with it. He was silent for a long time, as if he was really absorbing my words. Then finally he muttered, Maybe I do need to grow up. That would be nice, I teased lightly. James chuckled again, though there was something more genuine in his laughter this time. You know, Hannah, I always thought you were just tough because you had to be, but I think it's more than that. You actually care. Even though you're bossy and kind of terrifying, you care. I rolled my eyes. Don't get sentimental on me now, James. I'm not good with feelings. He smiled softly. Yeah, I noticed. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between us. Then James broke the silence with a soft question, one that surprised me. Do you think we could ever be more than just TS? I blinked, caught off guard. More than what? He hesitated, his gaze flicking away from me. You know, more than just this whole arranged thing. Could it actually be something real? I didn't know how to answer. A part of me had always written off the idea of a real relationship with James. He was immature, reckless, and for most of our time together, we had been thrown into this situation more for convenience than anything else. But now after everything, he was starting to show glimpses of something deeper, something real. I don't know, I admitted honestly. But maybe. James looked at me, his blue eyes searching my face. Maybe. I nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe. But it's going to take a lot of work. You're going to have to prove that you're more than just a spoiled rich kid who runs away from his problems. He smiled, that cocky grin slipping back into place, though now it seemed less arrogant and more hopeful. I can do that. I raised an eyebrow. We'll see. Just then, the door to the living room opened, and in strode Mr. Bennet, his expression stern as always. He glanced between the two of us before focusing on James. James, a word, Mr. Bennet said, his tone leaving no room for argument. James shot me a quick look, his smile fading slightly, but he nodded and stood up. Yeah, sure, Dad. As he followed his father out of the room, I couldn't help but wonder what Mr. Bennet wanted to talk to him about. Knowing him, it was probably about the incident today, or maybe something more serious, like what he expected from James moving forward. Left alone in the vast empty room, I leaned back against the cushions, my thoughts swirling. Maybe things were changing for the better. Maybe, just maybe, this strange, chaotic situation I had been thrown into would lead to something more. Something real. But for now, I'd take things one day at a time. I had a long way to go before I could fully trust James to handle himself. Until then, I'd keep my eyes on him. After James left the room, I leaned back into the couch, the weight of the day's events pressing down on me. I was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. The whole idea of James actually changing growing up was a new concept. The James I knew was carefree, stubborn, and utterly incapable of taking anything seriously. But now, after today, something seemed different about him. Still, part of me couldn't help but be cautious. Could someone really change that much? Or was it just the adrenaline talking? A few minutes later, I heard footsteps again, lighter this time. James stepped back into the room, his usual confident grin replaced by something more thoughtful. He didn't sit down but instead stood by the window, staring out at the dimming evening sky. "How'd it go with your dad?" I asked, breaking the silence. James shrugged. "The usual. He's not happy about the kidnapping, thinks I should be more careful, said something about tightening security." I raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" He turned around, crossing his arms, and he mentioned that maybe I should start taking more responsibility. "You know, for the family business and all that." "Surprise, surprise," I muttered, though it wasn't unexpected. Mr. Bennet had been grooming James to take over his empire for years. The problem was, James never seemed to care much about it. James sighed, leaning against the window frame. "Look, I know I've been difficult, but today made me think, you know. I can't keep acting like a kid forever." I tilted my head, watching him. "And what brought on this epiphany, the fact that you got kidnapped or the part where I had to rescue you?" He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Both, I guess, but mostly. I don't want to be that guy anymore, the one who always needs saving." I didn't say anything, letting his words sink in. James, as much as he could be in absolute pain, had never been one to admit weakness. This felt like a breakthrough, or at least the start of one. "Look," he continued, his voice softening. "I know I've screwed up a lot, but I want to try and fix things, not just for me, but for us. I don't want this thing between us to just be an arrangement anymore." I blinked, caught off guard by his sudden honesty. "Us? Yeah," he said, stepping closer. "I know it's crazy, but maybe we could actually make this work. You and me, for real." I didn't know what to say. The idea of us, James and I, being anything more than this strange forced relationship had always seemed far-fetched. But now, hearing him say it, there was a part of me that wanted to believe it was possible. "I don't know, James," I said finally. "You've got a lot to prove." "I know." He nodded, his gaze earnest. "And I will, I swear." For a moment, we just stood there, the air between us thick with uncertainty and something unspoken. Then James, in typical fashion, broke the tension with a smirk. "Besides, who else is going to put up with me? You've already proven you can handle me better than anyone else." I rolled my eyes, though a small smile tugged at my lips. "That's not exactly a compliment." He shrugged. "Take it how you want." Before I could respond, Mr. Bennet reappeared at the doorway, his stern expression still firmly in place. He looked at the two of us, his gaze lingering on me for a moment before turning back to James. "James," he said, his voice steady. "We need to have a serious conversation about your future." James sighed but nodded. "Yeah, I figured." Mr. Bennet glanced at me briefly, then back to his son. "Hannah, you might as well hear this too. It concerns both of you." I stood up, curiosity piqued. James raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything as his father motioned for us to follow him into his office. The room, with its dark wood paneling and shelves lined with books, felt imposing, like the kind of place where important decisions were made. Mr. Bennet walked over to his desk and sat down, steepling his fingers as he looked at us. "James," he began, "you've been coasting for far too long. You're my son, and one day, you will take over this family's business. Whether you like it or not, that's your responsibility. And if you want any kind of future with Hannah, you need to show that you're capable of more than what you've been." James flinched slightly but held his ground. "I get it, Dad, I'll do better." Mr. Bennet's gaze shifted to me. "And you, Hannah? I understand you've done more for James than anyone else has. That hasn't gone unnoticed. But I want to make sure you're clear on what you're getting into. This life. It's not easy. There will be expectations, challenges, and sometimes it will be harder than anything you've ever faced. Are you prepared for that?" I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. I hadn't fully thought about what all this meant, the family business, the future that was looming over us. But looking at James, standing there with a rare seriousness in his eyes, I realized that I was already in too deep to back out now. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Mr. Bennet nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because from this point forward, things will start changing. For both of you." James and I exchanged a glance, and for the first time, I saw something in him that I hadn't before, determination. Maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. As we left Mr. Bennet's office and headed back to the living room, James reached out and gently took my hand. His grip was warm and steady, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. "Guess this is it then," James said with a small smile. "Yeah," I replied. "I guess it is. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't such a crazy idea after all."